Jason, thank you for being on the show. Let everybody know who you are and what you're about.
So my name's Jason Kreidman. I run daduniversity.com. It's an educational platform for dads. And I've been doing this now for a couple of years and, make all kinds of YouTube videos and now on TikTok and everything else, just providing the advice and the things that I've learned through my parenting journey. So
Very cool. I can identify real well with that. I actually think Dad University is a really cool concept. How'd you come up with that?
kind of out of my own frustrations. It started as a podcast. Actually, I should say before that, it was a meetup group.
Mm-hmm.
A local meetup group. And I was just thought, hey, if I'm going through these issues, there's got to be other dads who are suffering with the same stuff. So
Mm-hmm.
the group, local support, I was having my own difficulties and then said, you know what, maybe my wife had suggested, maybe this parenting class would be pretty cool. So I took it and wow, this changed my perspective. I didn't know that this was possible, that you could even do things in a different way. And that blossomed into going through, instructor training on how to teach parenting classes. And I just kept my education going with that. And then started doing some YouTube videos. And that's really where I took off was started doing that. I didn't know anything how to make a video. And it's funny because some of the first videos that horrible now to look at, which, but lights are falling. You can't see that, but if you saw the outtakes, I had no idea what I was doing with lighting and sound and everything. I was recording on my phone and trying to edit it. And it was a nightmare, but I just stuck with it. I stuck with it. And part of that was just getting feedback. People responding and watching and then replying and asking questions. And it just kind of kept going from there. And so then I eventually decided to compile all the things I was learning and that I have learned into a course. And that became a second course and a third course. And I think now we have 9 different courses and we're making them all the time. And said, you know what, this might be good to have as a membership. And so people can access those. They can pay what they want. It's actually a thing called Pay What Feels Good. And they can choose what they want to pay and have access to that, all my videos, everything. So yeah, and it's turned out it's growing. It's really an enjoyable thing too, to kind of fills me up with helping these people sometimes not make the mistakes that I did.
Yeah, yeah, I understand that, and yeah, that's I think that's why this kind of resonates with me, and why I wanted to talk to you. And one of the things I wanted to talk to you about today is conflict resolution at home. Why do we, as parents, deal with problems differently at home than we do like at the office? Why does it feel different?
Well, I think there's certainly a different level of comfort. And also, while we might deal differently with our spouse than we deal with our children, the age differences, the differences in power. Like if we have a boss, we certainly deal with that differently than we do as a coworker, and so I think the dynamics of the relationships just naturally affect that. And I think though, comfort is a big one. We're just really comfortable. Like we let everything out. When we're at home, it's like there's sometimes not boundaries, and I think we often act in a way that we maybe shouldn't, or that we should, look at different ways of solving those problems. And so I think maybe try harder. We try harder at work.
Sure.
And I think because I don't want to upset this person, or I want to make sure we're collaborative and we're getting this project done, whatever versus home. It's like, no, we need to get this done quick. But I think there's also a different level of speed. I think it's just different dynamics.
Yeah.
What do you think? What do you think on that?
I think you're onto that. I think also we feel more comfortable at home. These are people like you help your kids, put their shoes on every day. There's just that different level of familiarity. And yeah, also I think you said the whole thing about, hey, man, we got to get this done right now. And I just kind of flash back to this morning, just trying to get my kid out the door for school. And
Right.
like how I was like, man, you got to come on now. We got to do this. And so I think, yeah, I think that pressure is different. And I think that the familiarity really does bring something to the table. And one of the things I wanted to mention, I've had a former guest on the show. His name's John. He was on the Wanted podcast. He is a bail bond recovery agent, among many other things. he goes into dangerous places all the time and tries to convince people to go with him, usually to jail, because they know that's where they're supposed to be. And
Right.
he said in that interview with us, and something stuck with me, yelling begets yelling. So
So
why
true.
does yelling not work at home?
Well, there's, I mean, many reasons. One is, kids will tune it out. It becomes sort of like the default, like it's not any different than something else. I think, at a certain level that you're not listening when you're yelling. That's a big one.
I
And
like that.
it happens too. And I mean, we can probably vouch for this, is that when somebody is talking to you in a respectful way, you're just more inclined to listen. It's just that is the nature of it. So I can totally identify with the gentleman you had. It's, when we are yelling or we're angry or such, that's most of the time, that's the response we get back. We certainly can do that with our spouses and figure that one out. Children may sometimes not do it because of the parental child relationship, they're scared, the respect that they're supposed to give, whatever it is. But like with your spouse, if you yell at your spouse is going to likely yell back. It's just, that's how we respond to people. It's, we see them, we mimic how they do how they do things. So yeah, I wholeheartedly agree with that. And that's a lot of what the teachings that I have are, and being mindful about how we speak to our children. It's not quite, it's not like you're talking to your children with, white gloves and being very, very, not saying anything, but it's being firm yet effective, but also loving. And so there's like this combination of being firm and loving, to where, I think I mentioned to you back when we were first talking, like I'm a recovering yeller. I thought that was the way that I would get my point across. And eventually you realize it's not really working. Yes, in certain instances, you might have to raise your voice, but that's just because your level's getting a little bit, you feel like you need to. The truth is, and most of the time you don't have to. And, my kids know that too. I mean, they respond much better when I am respectful, when I listen to them. I can usually then better get what I want out of them. Yelling works in the short term. I think that it can break down a relationship. There's long-term effects that can happen of being a sort of consistent yeller.
Yeah, I hear that, man. And you were talking about how it's kind of like a short-term gain, long-term loss, that it really can damage a relationship. So my next question is, how can parents settle conflict without raising their voices or blowing up? But what I'm really asking you, Jason, is how do I, as Andy, how do I do this? How do I get my point across without raising my voice or blowing up?
Well, so I teach a lot of this fatherhood mindset. It's a lot of how we come to the table. So, if you have a bad day at work, and let's say you work outside the house, you come home and you are not in a great mood because of work, you're stressed because of financial, whatever else is going on, that affects how you relate to your children. And so, part of it is understanding your own mindset, understanding how to calm yourself, understanding how to, learn patience. So there's so much that happens prior to engaging with the child, that understanding, okay, maybe it is a technique or two that I can do where my child's going to listen to me, but so much of it happens before we get to the child. It's the self-talk and saying, okay, I'm going to be talking with my child now. What kind of state am I in? Am I just yelling because I'm pissed off of something else? Did I just get in an argument with my wife? And so now I'm, demanding that my children go clean their rooms and yelling at them, or like, there's so much going on with us that I think part of that is, self-care, being mindful. I teach patience and calm and gratitude. I myself meditate. There's a lot of things. I exercise, I eat well. And part of that is how I got through being a yeller. It is understanding not only its effectiveness, but also how does it affect me and who I am, and raising my blood pressure and, getting angry, and it's just realizing it's not good for me. And so, long answer to a short question, how do we do it? I think it starts before, and then there are other techniques. When we don't have other techniques in our tool belt, we default to either yelling or leaving the room or, doing something fairly drastic versus, okay, I know 3 different things I can do here. I can take a deep breath. I can get down to and so you have a really small child, and it's like, I can get down to my child's level. Maybe I can put my arm on them. Maybe I can just give them affection. There's a lot of different techniques that I teach. It's, to get your point across or to get your child to listen. It's just learning new tools. And, depending on how you were parented, you probably didn't see a lot of tools, especially back in the day. Fathers didn't have a bunch of tools. Moms may have done things a certain way. That wasn't the way that we wanted to do it. Maybe they were too passive. So yeah, I think it's just learning those new techniques.
Yeah, you what you just said kind of echoed. I enjoy the comedian Bill Burr, and he talks a lot about his dad and what it was like for, what it's like for him being a dad now versus what it was like for him, being a son growing up. And like you talked about that, you just don't have the tools. Like nobody really thought about that. Like how do you deal with conflict resolution and dealing with all that sort of stuff? So it's kind of funny that that you brought that up because I see that parallel in a lot
and
of
it
people's
changes
lives.
as your child grows. I mean, dealing with a toddler and understanding how to calm them during a tantrum or even just ignoring the tantrum so that they don't have that pattern over and over and over again, versus when, I have teens now. I have a 12-year-old and a 14-year-old. Well, getting them to listen is different. It just takes, you have to repeat it 400 times. That's just what I've resolved. That's what I've figured. I actually was going to write a book called 1,000 Times. And it was like how to get your child to do something. And it's like, basically you just say it 1,000 times and they'll do it. The good news is we are not alone. Like, this is like not the one who's having the problem, who your child doesn't listen. This is every parent's issue. And it's like, how do we become better at that? And that's what Dad University, tries to teach.
Right. It's funny because you were talking about how when you come to the table with your kids and there's some sort of conflict, what is it that you brought with you from your day? I just did an article for a big men's website and social media following, and it was all about how to prevent road rage. And I talked to people about, if your cup gets full and you can't deal with all the stuff that's pouring into your life, you are going to spill over. And here you are saying the exact same thing. What I'm saying for folks, hey, this is how you avoid road rage. This is how you avoid, setting off on the road and potentially, doing something you're going to regret. It's the same thing at home that I'm seeing so that you don't yell at your kids or you don't yell at your wife or that sort of thing. It's really is how do you deal with that?
Deep. I mean, it's really like you can go into, us thinking that we can do everything, not giving ourselves any compassion. I just took a long multi-day course on self-compassion, and understanding how, because I've never done that. I've never been compassionate with myself. It's like, oh yeah, I can handle that. Or I should be able to do that. No problem. I don't care that there's 15 things going on. I have some financial obligations. My wife's upset. My kids are yelling. Like, I'm good. I can handle it. I should be able to handle it. And the truth is that it's hard. It is really hard. All of this stuff is really hard. And it's okay to recognize that, and realize, like, you can't be perfect at everything all the time. You can't be a perfect dad and a perfect husband and a perfect employee or a perfect boss or a perfect, or brother or son or whatever. You can't do all of those perfect all the time. And I totally thought you could,
Yeah.
And I end up almost killing myself in the process,
Yeah, I feel that because like I don't have that much compassion for myself either. I have Tony Blauer likes to talk about how your inner voice really resonates with who you are and how successful you are. And I generally have a very negative inner voice. It's like, hey man, just shake that off, just keep going, that sort of thing. And apparently I need to be more compassionate with myself to kind of get through all the stuff I'm working through.
Yeah. A little bit of insight. I mean, I went through this course, and I run daduniversity.com. I have a successful business. I'm married. I have these 2 kids. I have all the thing that came up for me, the biggest was, and I said, like, we did this exercise where we have to say something to ourselves every day. And like, would we say to ourselves? And I came up with, you are enough. Because it's this constant feeling that you're not, I'm not doing enough for my kids. I'm not doing enough for my business. I'm not being a good enough husband. I'm not being, and we all think like that in many cases. I mean, if you're not thinking like that, you are lucky. Show us how you did that. But it happens. And so it doesn't matter what you see on the outside, and that's why people are always so surprised, like whether it's celebrities or, people in the spotlight that are having difficulties. It's like, it's no different. Like just because somebody has money or just because somebody, is in does nothing to do with the fact that they could be struggling, And so that's just a note, going a little off tangent of just, mental health and mental wellness for dads. It's a lot of what I talk about. And so a lot of the videos will touch on subjects like that. And there's not really anything taboo. I'm not afraid to admit when I'm struggling. I may not say it to the world. Sometimes I do. I've had videos where I literally am talking about the struggle that I'm going through and having a rough time. And, nobody's perfect. We all make mistakes. We got to give ourselves that self-compassion. So it's going deeper than what appears to some of the things of like, well, how can we do this? And how can we talk to our kids without yelling and stuff? But that's where the roots are. Like, that's the iceberg, is that we're not feeling okay. We're not feeling okay. And so we ultimately have outbursts, have difficulty with our relationships at work, whatever, or have addictions. I mean, there's all kinds of. So.
Yeah.
I don't get too depressed.
No. So like, okay. So let's say I come home, I've had a rough day. What are some of the cues that I can look for in myself that's going to say, if my kid comes up and tells me that he's gotten, detention or he failed a test or something like that, that might trigger me. What are some of the signs that I need to look for in myself to know that I could really escalate a situation to something that my family doesn't need right now?
Well, if you know that coming home from the office or doing it is a difficult situation in general, like you have difficulty with that transition. I was talking to a guy, gave me this thing that every day when he comes home, because his wife was a stay-at-home mom. She had the 2 kids at home that were like, 1 and 3 or whatever it was. He gets 10 minutes to decompress when he gets home. So he actually comes in the back door. They have like a back door to their house. He'll go around the back. He changes. It's almost like Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. He changes his shoes into, more comfortable clothes. He has 10 minutes to just sort of breathe, decompress. And he said that has been a game changer for him because, he would always come in and then like, the wife is basically like, here you go. And now he's like, I'm now ready for it. Like, it's a 50-50 parenting situation. It's not like, oh, I've been at work all day, I shouldn't have to take care of the kids. It's like, no. She's been with the kids all day. Like, this is now, a 50-50 thing where when you get home, if not 100 view, let her have a break. So I think it's knowing your limitations. So that's kind of one. And if you need to give yourself a break, doing that. For some, in that same sense, it could be breathing exercises, meditation, but we feel it physically too. I, for myself, feel like, for me, it's in my chest. I can feel my heart rate. I start to sweat a little bit. I can feel myself getting that way. And one of the things that I've done is, and this has helped for me even in communication, is not taking things personally. So, when my child has something bad, my wife has something to tell me or whatever, I have to immediately go. My go-to now is like, okay, I can't take this personally. Like I'm not good enough that we now have enough more bills that I can't pay. And I just was working. And now I realize that we have $1,000 refrigerator that needs to be replaced. And because we go there I don't know about you, but we go there really quickly. And
Mm-hmm.
it just kind of exacerbates it. So I think the calming of the calming yourself is a very, very important thing, in knowing that and being ready for that action. And sometimes too, I find that just plain affection works. So literally, I mean, when my kids, especially when they're younger, I'd come home and they would just come running and hugging me. That kind of fixed my bad mood often. That alone, like my kids used to do what they would call a running hug. So they would see me, they get to the other side of the room, they're like, Dad, can I do a running hug? And now they're way too big that my son would knock me over. But they would do a running hug and just jump into my arms. Like, you can't get mad at that.
Right.
You just have to look at it from their perspective. And if they're not doing that, it was, hey, come here, I want to give you a hug.
Mm-hmm.
And being specific of saying, I want to give you a hug, not give me a hug. Like you're not giving me the affection because I need it. I would like to give you affection. That's actually a little nuance that I think is important.
Mm-hmm.
And that helps a lot. Same thing from your wife, like,
Yeah, sure.
just a 5-second hug or something, can really make a big difference. And so I know that. And then just going in and talking to myself before I, would get home, because I would have that kind of situation where, kids are all over the place. I'd walk up to the front door and there's mud from the day all over the place. And they brought their bike inside the house, and,
Right.
and instead of like, why is this not clean? It's, whoa, it looks like you guys did some awesome biking today. We'll get to the cleaning. We'll get to it. It's kind of changing your mindset of things and being a little bit more grateful.
Yeah.
So,
You talked about the hugging thing, and you're not the first person to come on here and talk about how hugging it out when you get home really is good. Beverly Baker, who runs Asphalt Anthropology out in California, she suggested the same thing, and just like, just go and just hug somebody, just that physical, action of just putting your arms around somebody that you love and hugging it out for just, a few seconds or a minute or something really goes a long way. And that's something she said that, and I was like, yeah, I really need to do that. And I'm so glad, Jason, that you've said it again today, because I'd kind of let that go. So
well, I'll
thank
tell you
you.
what. So my mother was an author and seminar speaker on relationships, so on personal relationships. She wrote a book called The 10-Second Kiss.
Mm-hmm.
So it was, and that's exactly what it was about, that's for your spouse, but it was coming home or at any given situation. When you give a 10-second kiss, that's a really long kiss for like saying goodbye, saying hello. It's different if you're in, intimate, but when you're just like, hey, I'm leaving for work, and you give like you count out 10 seconds, it's really long. And somebody will be like, whoa, like, what are you doing? But if you just did it unannounced. But yeah, so I kind of had that in my brain too, of just knowing and growing up with that, of like, affection is a big deal. And, for your child, it can be holding their hand, putting your arm around around their shoulder, depending on the ages too. Like, my kids aren't running up and hugging me as much anymore.
Mm-hmm.
But they're still, if I give affection, they are still willing to, and that's awesome. And so sometimes I have to remind myself, whoa, I need to give more affection.
Very cool. You talked about being a reformed yeller, and as we kind of wrap this up, tell me about a time where you were working through being a reformed yeller, where like you had an issue at home and you really wanted to yell, and you used your skills to work through that. Kind of tell us about that a little bit.
Wow. Well, there's too many. You know, I think there's been many different situations where I have been in the situation. So here is something that I look at I do this all the time because, of course, running Dad University and other things, I look at how are my children watching me right now? And so there has been situations where, let's say I'm talking to my daughter, I'm about to get upset, and my son's right there too. And so it's not, I've got a double whammy. They're both watching.
Right.
They're both listening and seeing exactly how I handle this situation. And so, I mean, I can give you a different example that I I was with my son, and he was a couple of years ago, and I had yelled before getting out of the car. We were like going to the store or something, and I yelled, and I was just like, "What?" And I slammed the door. I forget what it was. And he got upset. He was kind of like, ugh. I came back in, and I just said, "I am so sorry," because I thought about it, and I just said, "Listen, there was no reason for me to yell. I apologize. I shouldn't have done that, and I'm sorry." No joke. It was a couple days later. My son is in the car. I'm taking him to practice or whatever. He's yelling. He's getting upset, pissed off, slams the door and walks back and says, "Dad, I'm really sorry. I should have handled that better." And so it was like one of those moments. I mean, I knew right then as he did that, it's like, that's exactly what parenting is about. Like, it was so beautiful to see him model the behavior because I had decided to do that. And yeah, I mean, that's a perfect example of like, okay, I made that. Yes, I didn't avoid the yelling because I still got emotional. But I came back, I apologized, recognized that I did something wrong, and then he did it. But in many instances, I look at them, I calm myself, and I said, okay. And in my brain, it's like, what am I teaching them? Now, not everything can be a teaching moment,
Right.
We all have our moments, but there's many instances where I can just look at them and say, okay, what am I doing here? Don't want to show them that I'm getting this upset. And I might even say, listen, I really want to yell right now. I'm trying not to get upset. I'm going to calm myself down, and I'm going to come back in 5 minutes. Or, and so I've done things like that quite a bit.
Yeah, man, I like that. I like that a lot. Man, I appreciate all the wisdom and the experience that you've shared with us today. Where can people find out more about you online?
daduniversity.com, the website that's really got everything. It's got links to YouTube, everything. We're on every social channel. So that's where they can find the links and look at becoming a member if they're interested in getting access to the courses and videos and everything.
All right, man. Jason, thank you so much today. I appreciate everything that you've done. God bless you on your mission, buddy.
All right, you too. Take care.